Part 1, the kind of show that finds you. There are some stories that arrive at precisely the right moment. You do not go looking for them. They find you on a slow Tuesday night, in a hotel room far from home, on the couch of a friend's apartment, in the soft dark of a bedroom where you were supposed to be doing something else entirely. And then the theme music starts. And then a small boy runs along a beach. And something opens inside you that you did not know had been closed. Steven Universe is that kind of story. On the surface, it is a cartoon about a child who lives in a beach town called Beach City, with 3 alien warriors made of gemstones. His name is Steven Universe. He is half human, half gem, an impossible being whose existence was never supposed to happen. His mother, Rose Quartz, gave up her physical form to bring him into the world, which means Steven has never met her. He grew up with her memories, her legacy, her garden, her mystery, and the enormous emotional shadow she left behind. He grew up, in other words, with a ghost. And the show, at its deepest level, is about what it means to grow up beside something you cannot fully know, and to eventually become yourself anyway. But none of that is what people usually say when they try to explain why this show matters so much to them. They do not usually reach for plot summaries or thematic analyses. They say things like, "It was the first time I saw a character who looked like the way love feels." Or, "I was going through the hardest year of my life, and somehow this cartoon understood what I needed before I did." Or simply, quietly, "I do not know. It just got to me." This is a script for sleeping to. Which means that what you are about to hear is not an argument, not a lecture, not a thesis presented and defended. It is more like a long, slow walk through ideas that deserve to be held gently. It is more like sitting beside a fire and letting the warmth arrive without having to do anything about it. Steven Universe is a show full of philosophy, deep, careful, earnest philosophy, and philosophy, when done right, is not about answers. It is about learning to sit with questions in a way that does not make you anxious, learning to say, "I wonder," learning to say, "Is that not interesting?" Learning to say, "I do not know yet, but I would like to find out." So let us begin. Let the ideas wash in slowly, the way sleep washes in. There is no hurry. There is only the voice, and the story, and the darkness behind your eyes. Rebecca Sugar created Steven Universe and premiered it on Cartoon Network in 2013. It ran until 2020, when the limited series Steven Universe Future brought the story to a close. In that time, it became one of the most talked about, analyzed, debated, and beloved animated series of the 21st century. Not because it had the biggest budget, or the most jaw-dropping action sequences, or the most sophisticated animation. It was beloved because it was honest, because it looked at the things that animated shows for children were not supposed to look at: grief and trauma and identity and the complexity of love and systemic injustice and the difficulty of healing. And it looked at them with gentleness and care and an absolute refusal to lie. Rebecca Sugar has spoken in interviews about wanting to make a show that trusted its audience, that did not treat children as containers for simple lessons, but as full human beings who were already navigating complexity, who were already feeling things that had no easy names. She talked about wanting to depict all kinds of love without apology, and about drawing from her own experience, the uncertainty of her own identity, the difficulty of finding herself, and embedding it into the world she was building. She described the crystal gems as a way of exploring what it means to be a kind of person that society does not yet have a word for, what it means to live in a form that others do not fully understand. That is perhaps the most important thing to know about Steven Universe. Before we go any deeper, it is a show that was made by someone who needed it, and it became a show that millions of people needed. That alignment between the making and the needing is rare. It is the thing that turns entertainment into art. It is the thing that makes a cartoon about magical rock aliens feel, somehow, like it is talking directly to you. The world of the show is layered. At the center is Beach City, a small East Coast resort town that feels timeless and unhurried. The kind of place where the same families have run the same businesses for generations, where everyone knows everyone, where the salt air sits on everything and the boardwalk lights glow warm at night. Steven lives in a house attached to a magical temple, a structure grown from the crystal gems' home base, and the contrast between the ordinary boardwalk life and the extraordinary magical life is never really a contrast at all. For Stephen, they are the same world. His friends run the fry shop, and his other friends are made of light and gemstones and can pull weapons from their bodies, and he moves between both realities without treating one as more real than the other. This is, philosophically, already something important. The insistence that the extraordinary and the ordinary do not cancel each other out, that magic and the mundane are not opposites, that a world can contain both a giant cosmic threat and a really good cheeseburger backpack, and neither one diminishes the other. Most stories that deal in the fantastical eventually ask their characters to choose, to leave the ordinary world behind or to give up the magic and return to normal life. Steven Universe refuses that choice. It says, both of these are real, both of these matter. You do not have to choose. The gems, Garnet, Amethyst, Pearl, and Steven, are the Crystal Gems, a rebel faction who chose to stay on Earth and protect it from the Gem homeworld's colonization agenda. We will get to what that colonization means. For now, what matters is that they chose. In a world where gems are made for specific purposes and assigned roles they are never supposed to question, the Crystal Gems were the ones who said no. Who said, we want something different. Who said, this planet, this messy, imperfect, biological, mortal planet is worth protecting. Who said, freedom of choice matters more than the order we were built to maintain. Steven is the inheritor of that choice. He did not make it himself. He was born into it, or rather, he was born because of it. But the entire arc of his story is about whether a person can truly inherit a choice. Whether being born into a legacy is the same as choosing that legacy. Whether love for parents, for caregivers, for the people who shaped you, can coexist with the need to become something distinct from what they were. These are not simple questions. They are the questions that most of us spend decades working through. And Steven Universe spends 5 seasons and a limited series exploring them with a patience and depth that most prestige dramas would envy. The title sequence alone is a philosophical statement. Steven runs along the beach. He passes the temple, the fry shop, the car wash his dad runs, the big donut, the lighthouse. He waves to everyone. He is a child who is genuinely happy to exist, happy in the most uncomplicated sense, happy in a way that does not need qualification. And then, at the end of the sequence, the Crystal Gems appear beside him, and they are all silhouetted against a sunset sky. The word future appears in the song, because even from the very beginning, this show was always about what we carry forward. The future, not as something to fear, not as something to control, as something to walk toward, together, with warmth. Before we move forward into the deeper territories of this show's philosophy, it is worth pausing to name why the sleep format is actually appropriate here. Not just as entertainment, but structurally, philosophically appropriate. Because the ideas in Steven Universe are not ideas you parse with your analytical mind braced and ready. They are ideas that arrive most fully when you are relaxed, when your defenses are down, when you are perhaps half asleep, drifting on the border between thought and dream. The show itself works this way. Its pacing is slow by the standards of action cartoons. It takes time. It lingers. It lets a scene be quiet when quiet is what is needed. It trusts you to feel things without explaining exactly what you should feel. So this is the right way to receive these ideas. Lying down, breathing slowly, letting the words wash over you like water over stones. You do not need to hold on to every sentence. You just need to be here. We are going to walk through 12 territories of this show's philosophy. Some will be lighter, some heavier. All of them will arrive gently. And by the end, you will either be asleep, which is perfect, or you will be lying in the dark with the feeling that something has been quietly rearranged inside you. Either way, welcome. You found this at exactly the right time. Before we continue, wherever you are in the world right now, whatever hour it is, whatever it took to arrive at this moment of rest, drop a comment below. Tell us where you are watching from and what time it is. There is something quietly magical about knowing that people all over the world are lying in the dark thinking about the same ideas. And if this kind of slow, thoughtful content is what helps you rest, subscribe. There will be more. Part 2. You are not what you were made to be. The question of identity runs so deep in human experience that most philosophical traditions have spent centuries circling it from different angles, approaching it like a mountain range that has no single summit. Who are you? What makes you you? Are you the same person you were 10 years ago? 20 years ago? If everything about you has changed your beliefs, your body, your relationships, your understanding of yourself, is there anything left that constitutes a continuous self? And if there is nothing continuous, if you are always a different configuration of the same elements, then what does it mean to say I at all? These questions are not merely academic. They are the questions that keep people awake at 3 in the morning. They are the questions underneath the smaller questions. Should I leave this job? Should I end this relationship? Should I move to a new city? Should I become someone different? All of those smaller questions contain, at their root, the larger one. Who am I? And who am I allowed to be? Steven Universe approaches identity from a direction that is simultaneously very specific to its world and completely universal. The gems are made beings manufactured, intentional, designed with purposes, and the show uses this specificity to examine something true about human experience. We too are made beings. We are shaped by forces we did not choose. We are born into families, cultures, histories, bodies, circumstances. We receive identities before we are old enough to accept or reject them. By the time we are capable of philosophical reflection, enormous amounts of who we are have already been determined by factors entirely outside our control. The question the show asks is not, is this a problem? It clearly is, in the sense that it creates constraints, creates false ceilings, creates stories about ourselves that we have to actively work to revise. The question is, what do we do with it? How do we live inside a made identity while also insisting on the freedom to make and remake ourselves continuously? One of the show's most interesting explorations of this involves the character of Bismuth, a crystal gem who was bubbled by rose quartz long before the events of the series, and who is released by Steven in Season 3. Bismuth is enormously powerful, enormously joyful, enormously warm. She is a gem who loves making things, whose creativity and skill and enthusiasm for her work is completely genuine. She is also, the show reveals, someone who crossed a line that Rose could not accept. Bismuth had developed a weapon, the breaking point, designed to shatter gems rather than just poofing them. She believed that defeating the diamonds required being willing to permanently destroy them. Rose disagreed, and Rose's response was not to argue, not to work through it, but to bubble bismuth and lie to the others about what had happened. The show does not give us a simple verdict on this. Bismuth's argument has real weight the crystal gems were losing, and playing by rules their enemies did not follow was costing them enormously. The counter-argument, Rose's argument, Steven's argument, is that becoming what you fight against destroys something essential in the fighting. That the means shape the ends. That a liberation movement that shatters its enemies is not actually a liberation movement, but the show also holds Rose accountable for the way she handled it. Bubbling bismuth, hiding her, lying about it, this was not love. This was the same pattern that showed up throughout Rose's life, making decisions unilaterally, protecting people from information she thought would be too hard for them, prioritizing her own judgment about what was right over the autonomy and dignity of the people closest to her. Bismuth deserved a genuine confrontation. She deserved to have her argument taken seriously, rebutted seriously, lost seriously. Instead, she was erased from the story because Rose could not hold the complexity. This is identity as it plays out in community, because who we are is not only shaped by our internal nature, but by how others see us, respond to us, allow us to be ourselves. Bismuth's identity was frozen at the moment of her bubbling. She woke up to a world that had moved on without her, to friends who were gone, to a history she had no part in. Her grief at this is real, and the show honors it. Her subsequent rage, when she discovers that Steven is not Rose, but also that Rose had not been honest with her, is completely understandable. She is someone who was denied the basic courtesy of being taken seriously, and she is angry, and the anger makes sense. The resolution of her arc, her acceptance that she can disagree with the choices that were made, she can still mourn what was lost, and she can also choose to be here now, in this present, making things and fighting alongside people she loves. Is the show modeling something important about how we carry difficult history. You do not have to resolve everything to move forward. You do not have to make peace with everything that was done. You can hold the unresolved alongside the decision to continue. That is not dishonesty. That is the actual shape of a life. The philosopher Charles Taylor wrote about what he called the sources of the self, the frameworks within which we understand what is meaningful and what is worth being. He argued that identity is inherently narrative, that to have a self is to have a sense of where you have come from, where you are going, and what matters along the way. To lose your narrative is to experience a kind of disorientation that is not just intellectual, but felt, embodied, frightening. We need the story of ourselves in order to function. The Crystal Gem stories were disrupted by the war, by the colonization, by the shattering and corrupting of so many of their number. They have all been living in a kind of narrative fragmentation, with enormous gaps in their past, with futures that had to be rebuilt from very little, with identities that were forged in crisis and never had the chance to settle into something sustainable. The show's slow revelation of all of this, the layers beneath the layers, the secrets beneath the secrets, is the process of each character recovering their narrative. Not recovering it as it was before, which is impossible, but recovering the right to be the author of what comes next. This is the work of identity in Steven Universe, and it is the work of identity in human life. Not to find the fixed, essential self that was always there, but to build a self that is worth being, in full knowledge of everything that shaped you, with full acceptance of your own agency in shaping what comes next. Every gem in the world of Steven Universe is made with a purpose. They emerge from the ground, literally, from the earth, from the stone, like the planet itself is giving birth, and they already know what they are. A ruby is a soldier. A pearl is an attendant, an accessory, a status symbol for higher caste gems who own them. An amethyst is a brute force fighter, crude and strong. A sapphire is a rare aristocrat with prophetic vision. And a diamond is a ruler, a god, a being of such immense power and such complete certainty about her own superiority that the idea of questioning her role would be not just forbidden but genuinely incomprehensible. This is a caste system. We will return to it in more depth later. But for now, what matters is the philosophical frame it creates. In Gem Society, identity is not discovered. It is assigned. You do not find yourself. You are told what you are, and you are expected to embody that definition completely, forever, without deviation. The system does not believe in the self as a site of discovery or growth. The self is a function, and the function was determined before the self ever emerged. The show's central question, asked quietly, persistently, across every season and every subplot and every character arc is, what happens when a being refuses that assignment? Steven is the most obvious answer to that question, because Steven is literally undefined. He is half gem, half human. Homeworld has no category for him. He does not fit the taxonomy. He is an anomaly, a mistake, a being that the rigid system of Gem Society has no way to process, and this is precisely what makes him free. Not free in a simple or comfortable way, but free in the existential sense. Free in the sense that he cannot be told what he is, because nobody knows. He has to figure it out himself. But Steven is only the most visible version of this question. Every major character in the show is working through some version of the same inquiry. Every crystal gem is a gem who deviated from her purpose. Garnet is a fusion, a permanent fusion of two gems, ruby and sapphire. And permanent fusion is something Homeworld considers a perversion, an aberration, a violation of the proper order. Pearl is a pearl who chose a cause rather than an owner, who developed personhood in a society that considered pearls to be property, and who carries the weight of that history in ways the show slowly, carefully unpacks. Amethyst was created in a human kindergarten, a colonial extraction site, and emerged late and small and wrong by Homeworld standards, and she has spent millennia trying to figure out if being wrong by one standard means she is just wrong, period. These are not abstract philosophical problems. They are the kinds of problems that real people live with. The question of whether the person you were shaped to be, by family, by culture, by circumstance, by the expectations of the people who made you, is the person you actually are, is perhaps the most fundamental question of human experience. Steven Universe takes that question and embeds it in the bones of its entire world. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote that existence precedes essence, her way of saying, you are not born with a fixed nature. You exist first, and then you make yourself through your choices, your relationships, your actions over time. For Beauvoir, this was liberating, but also terrifying, because it means there is no excuse, no blueprint, no safe assignment to fall back on. You have to decide. Gem Society is the exact inversion of this philosophy. In Gem Society, essence precedes existence. You are made with a purpose, a nature, a role, a defined identity, and your existence is simply the enactment of that essence. There is no deciding. There is only doing what you were made to do, being what you were made to be. The Crystal Gems Rebellion is, philosophically, an act of existentialism. It is the choice to say, existence will precede essence. We will not be what we were made to be. We will figure out what we are by living, by choosing, by changing, and yet, and this is where the show becomes genuinely sophisticated, the choice is not clean. The Crystal Gems do not simply break free and become fully autonomous, fully self-determined beings. They carry their assigned natures with them. Pearl's caretaking instincts, her need to be needed, her difficulty imagining a life that is not organized around devotion to someone else, these are not things she simply chose. They were shaped into her by the conditions of her creation. Her freedom is always a freedom in tension with that shaping. She is always choosing herself against the grain of what she was made to be, and that friction is always present, always costly. This is actually more true to human experience than a simpler version would be. None of us simply transcend our conditioning. We are shaped by our families, our cultures, our early experiences, the stories that were told to us about who we were and what we were worth. The question is not, can I become entirely free of that shaping? The question is, can I become conscious of it? Can I see it clearly? And, seeing it clearly, can I choose differently, even when choosing differently is hard? Amethyst's arc is perhaps the most direct exploration of this. She emerged from the kindergarten, a gem-created extraction site in a desert in the American Southwest, and she was already marked as defective from the moment of her emergence. She was too small, too late, too messy. By homeworld standards, she was a failure before she began. And this marking has followed her through millennia. She performs not caring. She performs comfort with chaos and mess and impermanence. She performs being fine with who she is. But the show lets us see, again and again, that the performance is exactly that, a performance, a defensive structure built over something much more tender. The episode where she and Steven visit the kindergarten together is one of the most quietly devastating things the show does. Amethyst stands in the place where she was made, surrounded by the holes left by other amethysts who emerged before her, and she is small and her hole is too high and too shallow. She says, in the way she always deflects serious things, that this place just makes her feel terrible. And Steven asks why. And she says, because she came from here. Like this planet has a scar, and she is the scar. This is the show at its most precise. Because Amethyst is not wrong that something bad happened here. The kindergarten is a place of extraction, a place where a planet was drained of life so that gems could be grown. Something violent was done here. But Amethyst is not the violence. Amethyst is a being who emerged from that violence, who had no say in the circumstances of her creation, and who has been carrying the guilt and shame of those circumstances as if she chose them, as if being made in a damaged place makes her a damaged thing. Steven's response is the show's response, and it is philosophical in the most grounded sense. He says, essentially, you did not make this place. This place made you, and being made somewhere does not make you that somewhere. You are more than where you came from. This is a deeply important distinction. The question of how much our origins define us, how much the conditions of our creation, the circumstances of our birth, the wounds in the soil we grew from, is a question that most people are navigating in some form or another. And the show's answer is not, your origins do not matter. Your origins matter enormously. They shape you in ways you will spend your whole life understanding. But they do not determine you. There is a difference between being shaped by something and being limited to it. Then there is Peridot, who arrives as a villain in Season 2, a precise, analytical, homeworld loyal technician who has contempt for Earth and for anything that does not fit her ordered, efficient understanding of the universe. She is the show's portrait of the person who is entirely defined by her function, who has organized her entire identity around being good at her job, and who has never considered what she might be if she were something other than her job. Peridot's arc is one of the most satisfying in the show precisely because it is the slowest. Her transformation from antagonist to ally to genuine, complex character happens incrementally, awkwardly, imperfectly. She does not have a single conversion moment. She has a series of small reckonings, moments where the thing she thinks she believes runs up against the reality of what she is actually experiencing. And each time she updates, however reluctantly, however partially, she discovers she has an affinity for metal. She starts making what she calls meep morps, abstract art made from junk, and she defends their value with a passion she does not fully understand. She has opinions about a terrible soap opera. She becomes friends. And in that process, she becomes, slowly, someone. Not a function, a person. The show's thesis on identity, if it can be stated plainly, is something like this. You are not made. You are becoming. The making is where you start. The becoming is the life you live. And the becoming is always possible, always open, always available. No matter how old you are, no matter how long you have been performing the role that was handed to you, no matter how deeply the groove of the assigned identity has worn, it is a message that is almost embarrassingly hopeful, except that the show earns it by showing us characters who do not transform easily or quickly or without cost. The hope is not naive. It is hard-won. It sits alongside full acknowledgement of how difficult it is to change, how long it takes, how many times you have to try before the change starts to hold. You are not what you were made to be. You are what you are becoming, and you are still in the middle of it, which means the story is not over. Part 3. Fusion and the Philosophy of Meeting. The philosopher Martin Buber wrote about two fundamental modes of relating to the world. He called them I-it and I-thou. In the I-it mode, we relate to things and people as objects, as means to our ends, as entities that exist primarily in terms of their usefulness or their threat to us. We process them. We categorize them. We manage our relationship to them the way we manage our relationship to furniture. In the I-thou mode, we encounter another being as a full subject. We allow their reality to matter to us. We do not process them but meet them. And in that meeting, something happens that cannot happen in I-it relations. We are changed. Not manipulated, not moved strategically. Changed from the inside out by the genuine presence of someone other. Fusion, in Steven Universe, is the show's dramatization of what an I-thou encounter can create when it goes all the way. When two beings genuinely meet, do not just interact, but truly see and are seen by each other, something comes into existence between them that is more than the sum of their parts. Garnet is not just Ruby plus Sapphire. She is the thing that exists in the space between two people who have decided to be completely present to each other forever. She is the meeting given a form. This is why the moments where Garnet almost separates where Ruby and Sapphire are in conflict, where the meeting is under strain, feels so high stakes even when the external circumstances are relatively low-key. In Keystone Motel, the crisis that threatens to unfuse them is not a gem battle. It is a disagreement about Garnet's response to Pearl's betrayal. Ruby wants to be angry. Sapphire wants to let it go, to move past it, to trust that it will be okay because she has seen the future and the future is all right. And the disagreement is genuine, and both of them are right in different ways, and neither of them can fully inhabit the other's position. What we are watching is two people who love each other trying to find a way to hold two incompatible emotional responses simultaneously. This is the everyday work of love in the show, not the grand gestures, not the cosmic battles, but the quiet, hard work of being in a relationship with someone who processes things differently than you do. The work of saying, I see what you are feeling. I feel differently. I love you. How do we hold both of these? The episode resolves not through one of them winning the argument, but through both of them reaching toward each other. Ruby's volcanic anger thaws. Sapphire's cool certainty cracks enough to let the feeling through. They meet in the middle, in the place that is genuinely both of them, and they fuse back together. And Garnet emerges more whole for having been temporarily broken, because the work of reunion is also the work of renewal. There is a scene in the episode where Steven watches this unfold and says, "So Ruby and Sapphire fight?" And Greg's response is, "Everyone fights. The question is what you do after." This is one of the show's simplest and most useful pieces of wisdom. It does not promise that loving relationships are conflict-free. It does not suggest that the people who love each other most will always understand each other perfectly. It just says, what matters is the returning, the willingness to stay in it, the decision to come back after the conflict and try again. The broader philosophical point the show is making about fusion as a model of relationship is one that gets at something real about how intimacy changes people. When we are in genuine relationship with others, we take them into ourselves. Not in a possessive or colonizing way, but in the way that being truly known by someone and truly knowing them leaves a mark on both of you. After years of deep friendship, you find yourself thinking in their voice sometimes. After a long love, you reach for phrases that came from them. The people who have mattered to us are woven into who we are in ways that do not end when the relationship changes or when they are gone. This is Garnet's gift to the audience, a visible representation of something we all carry invisibly. The people we have loved are inside us. The relationships that shaped us are still operating in the way we move through the world. We are, all of us, a kind of fusion made of ourselves and of everyone who has ever genuinely met us. The show also uses fusion to think about what it means to create together. Opal, the fusion of pearl and amethyst, is graceful and powerful and also somewhat scattered because pearl and amethyst have never fully resolved their tension. Their differences show up in the fusion as a kind of distractedness, a tendency to wander from the task at hand, a beauty that is slightly unmoored. This is not a failure of fusion, but an honest representation of what happens when two people create together while still having unresolved friction between them. The creation is real. The beauty is real. The incompleteness is also real, and it will remain real until the underlying relationship does more of its work. Alexandrite, the fusion of all four crystal gems, barely holds together. She is enormous and impressive and barely controllable. The sheer number of selves involved, all with their own histories and needs and ways of being, makes maintaining the fusion an act of constant negotiation. The episode where they have to sustain Alexandrite through a dinner with Connie's parents is played mostly for comedy, but the comedy comes from something true. The more people involved in a collaboration, the harder it is to stay unified. The consensus keeps fracturing. The individual pulls keep reasserting, and sustaining a shared identity requires real effort, real commitment, real willingness to keep showing up for the thing that all of you are making together. This is true of families, of organizations, of movements, of any group of people trying to build something together that is more than the sum of their separate agendas. The fusion metaphor extends beautifully here into all the ways human beings try to make collective things and find that the making is always harder than the imagining. There is a dance that gems do when they want to become more than they are alone. They move together, sometimes formally, sometimes joyfully, sometimes with a kind of sacred seriousness. And when the connection is real, when the two beings are genuinely meeting each other in the movement, they merge. They become a single, larger, more complex being. A new name, a new form, a new voice that carries both of theirs. This is fusion, and it is one of the most rich and carefully developed metaphors in the history of animated television. Rebecca Sugar has talked about fusion as a way of depicting intimacy, all kinds of intimacy. The way two people, when they are truly close, create something between them that neither of them is alone. The dynamic, the relationship itself, the shared language and shared rhythm, these are the fusion. Every deep relationship creates a kind of fusion being, a third entity that lives in the space between two people and is made of both of them. But fusion in the show is not only about romantic love, though it is certainly about that too. It is about friendship, about trust, about what happens when collaboration is genuine, about the difference between connection that is mutual and connection that is coerced. Let us start with the most fundamental fusion in the show, Garnet. Garnet is, from the very first episode, presented as the leader of the Crystal Gems. Stoic, precise, powerful, a little mysterious, warm in ways she does not always show. She is also, we learn in Season 1's finale, a permanent fusion. She is Ruby and Sapphire, two gems who fell in love so completely that they chose to never separate. Garnet is not a temporary state. She is their relationship made permanent, given a name and a form and a continuous existence. The episode that explores this, Jailbreak, is structured as a rescue mission that turns into a revelation. And when we see Ruby and Sapphire reunite, when we see them dance back together after being forcibly separated, the show gives us something that is both a climax and a definition. Garnet is love. Not love as an emotion, though there is an ocean of emotion in both of them. Garnet is love as a choice. renewed constantly, enacted in the very structure of their being. The song that plays at the moment of their reunion, Stronger Than You, is the show's first truly great musical statement. Garnet sings it while fighting Jasper, who has been dismissing fusion as a cheap trick, a contamination of pure gem identity. And the song is a direct answer to that dismissal. It says, "This is who I am. This is not weakness. This is not impurity. This is what it looks like when two people who love each other choose to build something together. And what they build is stronger than either of them alone, not in spite of the love, because of it." The show is meticulous about distinguishing healthy fusion from coerced or distorted fusion. When two gems fuse in a state of conflict, when one is dominant over the other, when one is using the fusion to absorb or control rather than to genuinely meet, the resulting fusion is unstable, monstrous. The show uses this to say something very precise. Connection that is not mutual is not connection. Merger that is not consensual is not merger. Something that looks like closeness but is actually domination is not fusion. It is a wound wearing a fusion's shape. This is a direct engagement with questions of consent and exploitation in relationships. The show is saying, the difference between a relationship that grows both people and a relationship that consumes one person for the other's benefit is exactly the difference between a healthy fusion and a corrupted one. You can tell them apart by looking at who remains themselves. In a healthy fusion, both beings are present. In a corrupted one, someone has disappeared. Stevonnie is the first human-gem fusion, and they are presented with particular care. Stevonnie is the fusion of Steven and his friend Connie, and they are non-binary, a single being who contains a boy and a girl and is neither and both, who moves through the world in a body that does not map to the categories the world knows. The show treats Stevonnie's existence as beautiful and natural, while also being honest about the ways the world around them does not have the right frameworks to understand them. There is an episode called Alone Together where Steven and Connie accidentally fuse and become Stevonnie for the first time, and they go to a teen party on the boardwalk. The experience is shot through with the particular sensation of being perceived as something new, something the world has not made a place for yet. There is a moment where an older teen is pushy and invasive, and Stevonnie's response, to step back, to reclaim space, to leave, is the show modeling something important about what you are allowed to do when someone is not respecting your boundaries? You are allowed to leave. You are always allowed to leave. Malachite is the shadow version of fusion. The pairing of Jasper and Lapis Lazuli, two gems who have no love for each other, whose union is less a meeting than a mutual imprisonment. Jasper is trying to use Lapis as a vessel, trying to access her power for her own purposes. And Lapis, who has been imprisoned in a mirror for thousands of years, accepts the fusion but inverts it. She uses her own power to keep Malachite trapped underwater, keeping Jasper imprisoned as a way of keeping her from hurting others. They are both prisoner and captor. The fusion is a cage that both of them are locked inside. This is one of the show's most haunting images, because it is recognizable. Most of us have known or been one of the two people in a relationship that had become a kind of mutual entrapment, where neither person is fully free, where the connection has curdled into something neither person chose exactly, where leaving feels impossible and staying is also impossible. Malachite is the shape that relationship takes when it is given a form. And the show does not moralize about it. It just shows it, with sadness and without judgment. Later, when Malachite is finally separated, Lapis has to confront what the fusion did to her. She says, "I was terrible to her. She was terrible to me. I kept her trapped because I thought that was protection, but I did not feel good about it. I did not feel free." This is an honest description of what it is to be in a damaging dynamic. Not, "I was pure victim." Not, "I was pure villain." But, "I made choices. Those choices came from fear and pain. Those choices caused harm, and I need to reckon with that." Fusion as a philosophy is the show's most fully developed framework for thinking about relationships. It asks, what do we become together? What do we make in the space between us? Is it something that honors both of us, or something that erases one of us? Is it stable because both parties are genuinely choosing it, or is it stable because one party is too afraid to leave? These are the most important questions you can ask about any relationship. And the show asks them again and again in different contexts, with different characters arriving at different answers, because different relationships have different answers. There is no single correct fusion. There is only the question of whether this particular fusion between these particular beings is genuinely mutual. And that question has to be answered freshly, each time. Part 4. Love is not a feeling. It is what you do every day. There is a moment in Steven Universe that has stayed with many viewers long after everything else has faded. It is not a battle. It is not a revelation. It is a conversation between Steven and his father Greg in a van parked in the driveway, with the salt air outside and the radio off, and just the two of them sitting in the quiet dark. Greg says, "She was never really mine the way I was hers. She was always more than I could hold, but she chose me. And every day she kept choosing me was a miracle." This is what love looks like in Steven Universe. Not as a feeling that happens to you, as a choice you make and keep making and make again. As something that requires action, not just emotion. As something that is not proven by how intensely you feel it in the moments when it is easy, but by what you do in the moments when it is not. The writer Bell Hooks described love as a combination of care, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, and trust. She was emphatic that love is not just a feeling. Feelings pass, shift, fluctuate, are not always within our control. Love, as practice, is different. It is a commitment to specific behaviors, caring for someone even when you are angry with them, recognizing them fully as a person even when it would be easier to project your needs onto them, respecting their autonomy even when their choices scare you, showing up even when you do not feel like it. Steven Universe is full of love as feeling. The show is unabashedly emotional. It wears its heart fully on its sleeve. It never once suggests that feeling deeply is weakness. But the show is also, with quiet insistence, full of the gap between loving someone and loving them well. And it is honest about how large that gap can be. Rose Quartz loved. There is no doubt about this in the show. She loved the earth with a completeness that reshuffled the entire trajectory of her existence. She loved Greg with a tenderness and a delight that shines through every old photograph and home video. She loved the crystal gems fiercely, in ways that gave them something to anchor their identities to. But Rose Quartz also, the show gradually reveals, did things that were not loving. Not unloving, but insufficient. She kept secrets from the people closest to her because she believed she knew better than they did what they could handle. She saw in people what she wanted to see rather than what was fully there, which meant that some of what she called love was actually projection, a kind of love that is more about the lover's needs than the beloved's reality. The show does something genuinely courageous with her character. It refuses to let the love excuse the harm. It refuses to let she meant well mean no one was hurt. It insists that love, as a practice, requires honesty as a component, requires being willing to be known truly, not just to be admired, requires recognizing that the people you love are not extensions of your own story, but full beings with their own stories. Greg Universe's love for Rose is, paradoxically, the show's most complete model of love as practice. Greg is an ordinary human man, not powerful, not extraordinary. He drives a van and runs a car wash and talks to Steven about things he only partially understands. And he loved Rose Quartz with everything he had, fully aware that he would never fully have her, that she was something he could not own or contain. His love was not possessive, not grasping. He did not need her to be his in a way that diminished her. He was genuinely happy watching her be enormous, watching her be fascinated by the world. He delighted in her delight. He gave her the understanding of mortality, the possibility of impermanence, the strange beauty of things that end, without requiring anything in return except her presence while it lasted. This is the show's ideal of love. Generous, non-possessive, delighted. The relationship between Ruby and Sapphire, the love at the heart of Garnet, is the show's most sustained portrait of what love as daily practice looks like over time. They have been together for thousands of years. They have been Garnet continuously, which means their love is not a thing they feel sometimes and remember to enact. It is the structure of their existence. And even so, it is not effortless. Sapphire can see the future, and this gives her a kind of certainty that can slide into fatalism. Ruby is entirely in the moment, passionate, reactive, loyal, sometimes reckless. Their love works because their differences are complementary. But those differences create real friction, real hurt, real miscommunication. The episode The Question, in which Ruby, having spent some time as an individual, realizes she wants to propose to Sapphire, is one of the show's most emotionally complete sequences. Ruby realizes, I am not only Garnet, I am also me, and I am choosing this. Not because I was always going to, not because it was fated, but because I am actively choosing it, right now, as myself. The proposal is not a formality. It is the taking back of the choice that makes Garnet what she is. Sapphire's response, her willingness to unfuse, to risk the relationship in order to let Ruby be fully herself, to accept the choice as a choice and not a certainty, is equally important. Love, the show says here, requires the willingness to let go long enough to see if the other person is genuinely choosing you, not just staying with you out of habit or inertia, but choosing you, actively, clearly, from a place of genuine freedom. The wedding episode, Reunited, is the emotional peak of the series, a celebration not just of Ruby and Sapphire, but of everything the show has been building toward. It is flooded with color and music and joy, and the show earns every tear, because it has spent seasons showing us that this love is not just a feeling. It is the accumulated evidence of thousands of years of daily choosing, of staying, of working through the difficulties, of building something together that neither of them could have built alone. Part 5. The caste system and the courage to defy your purpose. The gem homeworld is a society built entirely on hierarchy. Every gem knows her place. Every gem knows, from the moment of emergence, what she is worth, what she is valued at by a structure that predates her and will outlast her. At the top, diamonds. Below them, sapphires, rubies, pearls, amethysts, quartzes of various kinds, and a vast array of other types, each slotted into their designated function. The hierarchy is not metaphorical. It is literal. A lower caste gem being rude to a higher caste gem is a transgression against the order of the universe as Homeworld understands it. There are many words for this kind of society. One of them is caste system. Another is aristocracy. Another, if we are being direct about it, is oppression. A system in which the circumstances of your birth determine the entire arc of your life, with no mechanism for mobility, no acknowledgement that you might be more than your designation, no concept of the individual except insofar as the individual successfully enacts her assigned type. Peridot's arrival as an antagonist in Season 2 is the show's most direct engagement with the perspective of someone who has fully absorbed the Homeworld ideology. She is efficient, rational, condescending to gems she considers beneath her, and utterly certain that the Diamond Authority's vision for the universe is simply correct. She has no moral framework in which to question this, because the framework she was given has no category for wrong when authorized by diamonds. Wrong in Homeworld means inefficient or disobedient or defective. It does not mean harmful to beings whose pain does not register in the ledger. The process by which Peridot comes to see the ideology she was raised in as ideology, as a set of choices presented as facts, as a constructed reality presented as natural, is one of the most carefully written character arcs in the show. She observes things that do not fit her model. She is forced to interact with the crystal gems as people rather than as obstacles. She forms something that functions like respect, then something that functions like affection, then something that functions like friendship. And each of these forces a small renegotiation of her worldview. The moment she calls Yellow Diamond a clod, directly, to her face, over a communicator, in front of everyone, is one of the show's great cathartic beats. It is the moment when Peridot crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. She has committed the ultimate transgression. She has said in effect, "You are wrong, and I am saying so publicly, and I know what that means for me, and I am saying it anyway." The price of this is exile. The price of defiance in a caste system is always exclusion, removal from the system, loss of whatever protections the system offered. And the show does not pretend it is a small price. But the cost is worth paying. Because what Peridot gains, belonging on Earth, genuine friendship, the discovery that she is more than her function, is something the caste system could never have given her. The caste system defines value by type. What Peridot discovers on Earth is that she has value as a specific individual, a unique being, Someone who makes art from junk and cares passionately about terrible television and is capable of an intimacy and a tenderness that her homeworld designation never had room for. The show's other great defier is Pink Diamond, who became Rose Quartz. Pink Diamond was the youngest and lowest status of the four diamonds. She was given Earth as her first colony, expected to oversee its extraction and transformation, and she fell in love with it. With the life on it, with the animals, the humans, the sheer abundance and variety of living things, she did not want to colonize it. She wanted to protect it. She went to the other diamonds and asked them to spare the planet. They refused. She asked again. They refused again. And then she did something unprecedented. She disappeared. She created a false report of her own death and became Rose Quartz, a quartz soldier from her own colony. She gave up the diamond identity, the diamond name, the diamond power structure. She chose to be something smaller, something freer, something that could fight for what it loved without the weight of the cosmic hierarchy pressing down on every choice. This is an act of class defection. The decision of a person born into the ruling class who decides that the ruling class's project is wrong and who is willing to give up the privileges of that class in order to oppose it. But the show is also critical of Rose because her deception of the crystal gems was a profound betrayal of trust. Because she built a movement on a foundation of secrets. The caste system, the show suggests, does not just damage those at the bottom. It damages everyone. The diamonds at the very top are not free. They are imprisoned by their own power, by the weight of what they are required to be. Pink Diamond's rebellion is partly a rebellion against what diamonds are required to be: immovable, unfeeling, absolute. She wanted to be allowed to care. She wanted to be allowed to love a small blue planet she was not supposed to value. She wanted to be allowed to be wrong. The courage to defy your purpose, in a system that defines your purpose as your identity, is the courage to risk everything. Risk belonging, risk safety, risk the story you have been telling yourself about who you are. And the show presents each act of defiance not as automatic, not as obvious, but as genuinely costly and genuinely worth the cost. Part 6. Grief, Silence, and the Weight of Unsayable Things. The psychologist C.S. Lewis, writing after the death of his wife, described grief as feeling less like sadness and more like fear, a sudden blanketing terror, as if the world had become fundamentally unreliable, as if the solidity you had depended on had revealed itself to be provisional, conditional, capable of being withdrawn without notice. He described how ordinary life continued. People ate, worked, spoke to each other while inside. Something had simply stopped or changed beyond recognition, leaving him wandering in a landscape that looked the same but felt completely different. This description maps precisely onto what the show gives us through Pearl. Pearl moves through the world. She trains. She fights. She advises. She loves Steven in her complex, layered way. She is present in every episode, doing the work of being a crystal gem, holding the line, keeping things together. And underneath all of that activity, there is a landscape that looks the same as before, but feels completely different, because the person who made it feel real is gone. The show does something very specific with Pearl's grief that distinguishes it from most media portrayals. It does not use her grief as backstory that explains her and then recedes. It keeps it active. It shows her grief operating in the present, shaping her choices in the present, creating problems in the present. Pearl's feelings for Rose are not something she has processed and moved past. They are alive in her, continuously, and the show refuses to let us forget this. In the episode Sworn to the Sword, Pearl is training Connie to be Steven's protector in combat. And the way she trains Connie, drilling into her the idea that a good knight puts her charge's life above her own, that she exists to shield him, that her own survival is secondary, is recognizable as exactly the self-abnegating devotion Pearl once felt for Rose. Pearl is passing on her own psychology. She is, without quite meaning to, teaching Connie to love the way Pearl loved, which is a way of loving that nearly destroyed Pearl when Rose was gone. Steven notices. He confronts Pearl about it, in his gentle way. And Pearl's response is the most honest thing she says in the entire season. She tells him that she was never the right gem for a mission, that she was a pearl, that pearls are not supposed to be anything except to serve, that Rose gave her the chance to be something, and that all she wanted for thousands of years was to be worthy of that chance. Her grief is not just for Rose. It is for the self she built entirely around Rose, the self that has no center when Rose is gone. This is the psychology of someone who has loved too completely in the wrong direction. Not wrong because love is wrong. Wrong because love that makes the beloved into the entire foundation of one's identity is a love that, however genuine, sets up the lover for a kind of devastation that cannot easily be survived. Pearl needed to be needed by Rose. Rose needed Pearl, genuinely, for thousands of years. But Rose also moved on, changed, loved others, became interested in things Pearl was not part of. And every time that happened, something in Pearl had to either grow to accommodate the larger reality of Rose or hold tighter to the version of Rose that centered Pearl. And Pearl, more often than not, held tighter. The show treats this not as a moral failing, but as a psychological reality, one that Pearl is slowly, painfully, with many setbacks, learning to move past. The episodes where Pearl tries to understand herself outside the context of devotion to Rose are some of the show's most moving because they show the genuine difficulty of re-finding yourself when you have spent thousands of years being organized entirely around someone else. And this is not alien. This is the experience of anyone who has defined themselves primarily through a relationship and then had to learn who they are when that relationship changes. The parent whose identity was organized entirely around raising children who are now grown. The partner whose sense of self was organized entirely around a relationship that ended. The employee whose entire personality was organized around an institution that let them down. These transitions require a kind of identity reconstruction that is among the most demanding things a human being can be asked to do. The show's hopefulness here is not that Pearl completes this reconstruction, it is that she makes real progress on it. That by the end of the series, she has found things that are genuinely hers. That she has begun to imagine a future that is not organized around grief. That the grief is still there and always will be, but it no longer takes up the entire room. Amethyst's grief, too, deserves more careful attention than it sometimes receives. Her sadness is less theatrical than Pearl's, less visible, because it is buried under so many layers of performance. She performs not caring about her origins, not caring that she was made wrong, not caring that there are versions of herself out there who fit neatly into the system that created her while she never did. She performs comfort with her own messiness as if the comfort were genuine, as if she had fully made peace with being an error. But in moments of stillness, and the show creates these moments deliberately, we see through the performance. We see that Amethyst has never fully forgiven herself for existing the way she does. We see that the chip on her shoulder about being underestimated is a mirror image of the fear that the underestimators might be right. We see a gem who loves fiercely and deflects constantly, and is always beneath the deflection, waiting for someone to finally confirm what she has always been afraid is true. The healing that comes for her, when it comes, is the healing of having Steven tell her again and again, in different ways, you are not a mistake. Not because the circumstances of your creation were not problematic, they were. The kindergarten was a real harm. But you, Amethyst, are not the harm. You are the person who emerged from it, and that person is not required to embody the harm that made her. She is allowed to be herself, completely, without qualification. This is the show's deepest offering to everyone who carries grief about their origins. You are allowed to exist without apology. You did not choose where you came from. You are here, and the here-ness is enough. Pearl has been grieving for thousands of years. This is not an exaggeration. Rose Quartz, the being Pearl loved more completely than she had ever loved anything, the being around whose existence Pearl had organized her entire identity, is gone. And Pearl is still, in the present of the show, standing in a house in Beach City, watching a half-human boy who carries Rose's gemstone, and grieving. She does not use that word. She rarely talks about it directly at all. Instead, it comes out in other ways. In her obsessive dedication to training, to protecting the crystal gems, to keeping things ordered and right. In the way she looks at Steven, sometimes with an expression that contains more than any child should have to feel pointed at them. Grief is one of the show's great subjects, and the show approaches it with the kind of honesty that is rare in any medium. The insistence that grief does not resolve. That healing is not the same as ending. That you can carry something for a very long time and still be carrying it. Still have days when it is the first thing you feel when you wake up. This is accurate. Anyone who has loved someone who is gone knows this. Grief does not arrive at a conclusion. It changes form. It becomes more livable. It loosens its grip on the day-to-day in ways that allow you to function, to feel joy, to invest in new things. But it does not disappear. And the expectation that it should, the cultural pressure to perform recovery, to say I'm fine now by a certain point, is one of the ways our relationship to grief is systematically dishonest. One of the most powerful episodes about Pearl's grief is Story for Stephen, which presents the early days of Greg and Rose's relationship through Pearl's eyes. We see Pearl watching Rose fall in love with a human, and the pain is not just about jealousy, though there is that too. It is about watching the person you have organized your entire existence around begin to redirect her attention toward a different kind of life. Watching your centrality in their world slowly shift. Pearl does not handle this perfectly. We see her trying to hold herself together, performing acceptance that is not quite complete, being in the most human sense in the middle of something she does not have good tools for. The show does not judge her for this, it sees her. And then there is Lapis Lazuli, the show's other great portrait of grief. Lapis was imprisoned in a mirror for thousands of years, used as a communication device, trapped in frozen immobility. When she is finally freed, she is deeply, quietly traumatized. She wants nothing except to go home, and when she gets home, home has changed beyond recognition. Her grief is for the life that was stolen, for the thousands of years she spent as an object, and her grief comes out, for a while, as rage. She tries to move the ocean to create a path home, not caring about what that will destroy, because she has been not cared for so long that she has lost the ability to extend care outward. Later, when Lapis talks to Stephen about having been fused with Jasper in the destructive Malachite fusion, she says, I was terrible to her. She was terrible to me. I kept her trapped because I thought that was protection, but I did not feel good about it. I did not feel free. This is an honest description of what it is to be in a damaging dynamic, acknowledging your own participation without erasing the harm done to you. Pearl's compelled silence, the command Rose gave her as Pink Diamond that prevented Pearl from speaking the truth about the fake shattering, is the show's most direct portrayal of the way grief is made worse when it is trapped. Pearl spent thousands of years unable to speak the most important truth she knew, not because she chose not to, because she was literally unable. The command was woven into her, and the show is clear about the psychological cost of this. Her grief, her trauma, her identity confusion, all of it was intensified by the impossibility of speaking, by the weight of a secret that had no outlet. We know from psychology that putting experience into words, naming what happened, speaking it aloud, having it witnessed by someone else, is a significant part of how processing works. The compulsion that prevented Pearl from speaking was an interference with the basic mechanism of healing. Grief, in Steven Universe, is always treated with the respect it deserves. It is not rushed. It is not resolved too quickly or too cleanly. It is shown as the cost of having loved, as something that stays, that must be carried, that can be borne but not erased. And the show's compassion for people in grief is so total and so consistent that it reads as a direct communication from its creator. I see you, and your grief is real, and you do not have to be over it yet. Part 7. The Diamond Authority and the Problem of Unchecked Power. Consider what it would mean to be completely certain that you were right. Not right about a small thing, right about everything. Right in a way that was never really tested, because the structure of the world you lived in made it impossible for your rightness to be challenged. Right in a way that you had never needed to verify, because rightness was built into your identity. This is the condition of the diamonds. And it is the show's most sophisticated political portrait of what power looks like when it has existed so long in so uncontested a form that it has ceased to understand itself as power at all. When dominance becomes invisible to itself, because there has never been anything strong enough to show it its own reflection, Yellow Diamond is control. She is efficiency and order and the management of the universe as a vast bureaucratic enterprise. She has governed so many planets and directed so many operations that individual planets have become entirely abstract to her. They are resources or they are problems to be solved. They are never, to Yellow Diamond, places where things live. Blue Diamond is grief. She has held longest to the loss of Pink Diamond, spending millennia in a kind of suspended mourning, keeping Pink's zoo operational as a kind of shrine, crying so consistently and so freely that her power, the ability to force her feeling into others, operates almost continuously. Everyone near Blue Diamond is sad, because Blue Diamond is always sad, and she is so powerful that her sadness does not stay inside her. White Diamond is perfection. She is the most powerful and least seen of the three surviving diamonds, a being so absolute in her certainty of her own superiority that she has retreated into her own enormous headship. She has decided that imperfection is a kind of disease, and that the appropriate response to imperfection is erasure. The imperfect thing is taken out of the imperfect gem, and what remains is a shell that White Diamond controls directly, puppeting them, using them as instruments. This is the show's portrait of the endpoint of power without accountability, not cackling evil. Something quieter and more total. A being who has become so convinced of her own rightness that she has lost the ability to imagine being wrong. The key to understanding the Diamond Authority as a political structure is that it is not based on naked force, though force is certainly present. It is based on ideological capture, the idea that the hierarchy is natural, that the order is correct, that the diamond's judgment is infallible because the diamonds are diamonds. Gems do not just obey because they fear punishment. They obey because they genuinely believe the system is right. They have been shaped, from the moment of their creation, to believe it. This is how real-world systems of oppression function at their most stable, not through constant overt coercion, but through the manufacturing of belief that the hierarchy is natural, that the powerful deserve their power. The diamonds are also shown to be in pain. This is where the show's commitment to complexity becomes most demanding. Yellow Diamond and Blue Diamond are not simply cartoon villains performing evil for evil's sake. They are beings who have been carrying enormous grief since Pink Diamond's apparent death. When Steven first reaches Blue Diamond, when he enters the zoo and finds her weeping, the scene plays not as confrontation but as recognition. Blue Diamond is capable of being reached, but softness is not the same as goodness. Her grief has made her sympathetic but has not made her wise. The show is saying compassion for a person's pain is not the same as endorsement of their choices. Both things can be true simultaneously. Steven's confrontation with White Diamond in Change Your Mind is the show's most direct philosophical argument. White Diamond has taken over the crystal gems, using them as puppets, having removed the parts of them that made them individuals. And Steven stands in front of her and says, essentially, "You cannot do this. These are people. Their imperfections are not flaws. Their imperfections are them." When White Diamond tries to separate Steven from his gem to create the pure pink diamond she has been waiting for, she gets something she did not expect. And in the attempt to puppet him, she sees herself through his eyes. She sees herself as he sees her, not as a god, but as a person who has caused enormous harm and who is afraid, at the deepest level, of being wrong. Her white glow cracks and underneath it there is color. She blushes pink, and for the first time in what may have been an unimaginable stretch of time, she is genuinely, visibly herself. Power without accountability, the show argues, is not sustainable. And the correction for it is not simply a more powerful force opposing it. It is the persistence of individuals who refuse to accept the terms it sets, who insist on their own complexity, who keep showing up and saying, "This is not right." Part 8. Trauma and the Cost of Always Being Fine. There is a version of Steven Universe that pretends its hero is fine. That version does not exist. The show that does exist is more honest than that. From very early in the series, we see the ways Steven absorbs and carries the emotional weight of the people around him. He is, by temperament, a connector, someone who notices what others are feeling, who naturally orients toward finding the thing that will make it better, who finds his sense of purpose in being the one who holds things together. This is his gift. And the show understands, with extraordinary precision, that gifts can also be burdens. The psychology of the caretaker, the person who has organized their identity around attending to others' needs, is one of the most under-examined territories in popular culture. It is easy to celebrate. The selfless helper, the one who gives tirelessly, the person who puts everyone else first. These are recognizable heroic archetypes, and their heroism is not fake. But the show asks what this costs. Not theoretically, but in the body, in the nervous system, in the moments when the caretaker is alone and not performing and has to face the question of what is actually there. What is actually there in Stephen's case is a great deal of unprocessed material. The structure of his childhood, being the child of a legendary figure, being raised by grieving adults who loved him but were also working through their own enormous losses, being placed from a very young age in situations of real danger that required him to be brave and effective, has produced in him a pattern that therapists would recognize immediately. He is hypervigilant. He is hyper-responsible. He has learned to be good at emotional labor because emotional labor was, for much of his life, a survival skill. None of this was wrong of the crystal gems to need from him. None of this was conscious mistreatment. But the cumulative effect is a child who has never fully learned that his own needs are real, that his own pain matters, that he is allowed to be struggling without immediately redirecting that struggle into care for others. In Steven Universe Future, with the immediate external crisis resolved, all the things he never processed begin to come due. The grief for the mother he never met, the anger about carrying her legacy, the terror that underneath the warmth and the optimism there is something darker, something hurt, something that he has never let himself look at directly. Future is the show exploring what happens when the hero has saved the world and still does not feel okay. When the mission is accomplished and the feelings do not resolve. Steven develops what is essentially a stress-induced superpower. His gem destabilizes, creates pink energy that shatters things around him when his emotions get too big. It is a literal representation of what happens to a body that has been holding too much for too long. When the system that was built to manage the load finally starts to fail, the show is engaging with the somatic dimension of trauma. The understanding, now well supported in clinical literature, that trauma is not only a mental phenomenon, it lives in the body. It manifests in physical symptoms. It shows up in the nervous system's dysregulation. Steven's physical destabilization is the show accurately depicting what long-term unprocessed emotional stress does. The resolution is therapy, an actual depicted meaningful engagement with professional support. Steven's therapist creates space for him to begin to talk, and the talking is not a cure. It is a beginning. It is the first step of what is clearly going to be a long process. But it is presented as the right and necessary step. For a generation of young viewers who were told to handle things on their own, who were told that needing help was weakness, who had never seen someone they admired say, "I need to talk to someone," this was significant. The show's final word on trauma. It is not the end. It is something that happened, and that leaves marks, and that requires time and care and the right kind of help. But it is not the final word on who you are. You are not your hardest years. You are not what was done to you. You are the person who is, still, after all of it, here. Part 9. Colonialism, Extraction, and Learning to See What Is Already There. The philosopher Frantz Fanon wrote that colonialism does not simply take territory and resources. It takes the colonized people's relationship to their own history, their own culture, their own sense of what is real and valuable. It replaces the colonized person's framework for understanding the world with the colonizer's framework, which positions the colonized as peripheral, as unimportant, as existing primarily in relation to the colonizer's project. To decolonize the mind, Fanon argued, is not just a political project. It is a psychological and philosophical one. It is the reclamation of the right to define your own reality, to set your own terms, to exist as a center rather than as a periphery. Steven Universe does not cite Fanon, but its engagement with colonialism operates at exactly this level. The harm the gem homeworld does to Earth is not only ecological, though the ecological harm is real and depicted directly. It is also the harm of imposing a framework, the framework of instrumental value, of extraction, of everything exists to serve the project onto a world that had its own framework, its own way of being, its own relationships between the things that lived there. The humans in the zoo are the show's sharpest image of what it looks like when a colonizing power has replaced the colonized group's framework so completely that the colonized no longer have access to their own. The zoo humans do not know they are in a zoo. They do not have a concept of outside. They do not know there was ever a before. The theft of their origin has been so total that they cannot grieve what was taken because they do not know it was taken. They are comfortable, and their comfort is the completion of the colonial project. A people so thoroughly managed that they have ceased to be a people and have become, in the homeworld's terms, a collection. Greg's encounter with the zoo humans is one of the most quietly uncomfortable sequences in the show. He tries to connect with them. He speaks to them. And they stare at him with genuine warmth and genuine incomprehension. They are friendly in the way a person raised in isolation is friendly, with no framework for the complex negotiation of contact that humans who have lived in community have developed. They have been kept too simple by too much comfort. The show's response to this is not a dramatic liberation scene, though there is a moment of crisis and disruption. The response is slower and less satisfying in the narrative sense. The zoo humans need to learn, slowly, what it means to be free, what freedom even is, what they would want if they had the concept of wanting. This is not something that can be handed to them in a scene. It is a process, and the show acknowledges that by not resolving it. By not pretending that once you remove the cage, the inhabitant automatically knows how to live outside it. This is honest about how decolonization actually works. Freedom is not just the removal of constraint. It is also the recovery of the capacity to imagine yourself as someone who can and should choose. That capacity, when it has been suppressed for long enough, does not simply spring back when the suppressor is removed. It has to be rebuilt, slowly, with patience and support and a lot of wrong turns. The show's treatment of Earth itself as a colonized subject is also worth dwelling on. The kindergartens drain the planet's resources, yes, but the show also gives us the image of the corrupted gems as something like a wounded biome, the ecological fallout of a conflict between powers that did not care enough about what they were fighting over. The corrupted gems are the show's image of collateral damage. Beings caught in the crossfire of a war they did not start, transformed into something monstrous, not by any choice they made, but by the sheer power of forces operating at a scale far above them. Stephen's project of healing the corrupted gems is, in this reading, an environmental project as much as a personal one. It is the project of restoration of returning beings to something like their original complexity, of undoing the simplification that trauma and exposure to overwhelming force imposes. And the project requires exactly the kind of attention that the show advocates. Patient, non-judgmental, willing to see the person inside the damage, willing to keep the question open about what healing might look like even when it is not yet visible. The gems from the human kindergarten in the American Southwest give the show its most explicit engagement with the specific geography of colonialism. The land is American land, and the kindergarten has left it dead. The show makes this literal. The extraction site is there, visible, unchanged, a permanent record of what was done. An amethyst, walking through it, is in some sense walking through the history of a place that was damaged long before she arrived, and will carry the damage long after she is gone. She is not responsible for the damage, but she lives in it, she came from it, and she has to find a way to be herself inside that history without being destroyed by it. This is the situation of anyone who has grown up in or near a history of colonialism, extraction, or dispossession. You did not make the damage, but you live in it. You came from conditions that were created by it. And the question of what you do with that, how you carry it without being flattened by it, how you find your own identity inside a history that was, in important ways, not made for you is one of the most important questions a person can face. The Gem Homeworlds project is this. Find planets with the right mineral composition, implant gem incubation structures, use the life force of the planet to grow new gems, harvest the resulting gems, and move on. The planet, in this process, is not a place. It is a resource. The life that exists on it, the ecosystems, the species, the accumulated complexity, is a nuisance or an irrelevance. It is not a reason to stop. This is colonialism. Not as metaphor exactly, but as direct portrayal. The show draws the parallel unmistakably. An imperial power arriving at a territory it considers wild and unclaimed, extracting its value, importing its own population, dismissing or destroying the existing inhabitants. The kindergartens leave the land dead and scarred. The show returns repeatedly to the petrified desert landscape of the prime kindergarten, with its empty holes and its barrenness and its complete absence of life, as the visual image of what extraction leaves behind. Something was here. It was taken. Now there is only the negative space. Pink Diamond's crime, in Homeworld's eyes, was caring about what was already there. She saw the life on Earth, the animals, the humans, the diversity, the sheer vitality of a biosphere that had evolved over billions of years. and she experienced it as valuable, not instrumentally valuable, intrinsically valuable, valuable because it existed, because it was here. This distinction between instrumental value and intrinsic value is one of the most fundamental in environmental ethics. Instrumental value says, this is worth protecting because of what we can get from it. Intrinsic value says, this is worth protecting because of what it is. The homeworld ideology allows only instrumental value. Pink Diamond's rebellion begins with the assertion of intrinsic value. These things matter even if they do not matter to us. The humans in the homeworld zoo, kept by Blue Diamond as a memento of Pink Diamond's project, are one of the show's most disturbing images precisely because of their contentment. They do not know they are in a zoo. They have been there so many generations that they have no memory of Earth. They are comfortable in the bounded way that captivity allows, and the show presents this, clearly, as insufficient, as not happiness but its simulacrum, as the false peace of not knowing what has been taken. Peridot's arrival on Earth and her eventual choice to stay is the show's most extended exploration of what it means to shift from an extractive to a relational understanding of a place. She arrives treating Earth as a resource to be evaluated. She leaves treating it as a home. And the shift is tracked through a series of genuine encounters with the land, with the animals, with the people that slowly accumulate into relationship. She makes art from the junk she finds there. She learns the name of the small corner of the planet where she lives. She develops an attachment that is specific and local and grounded, which is the opposite of the colonial vision that treats all places as interchangeable raw material. The show's environmental message is quieter than its other messages, but it is consistent. What is already here has value. The life that exists before the extractors arrive has value. The complexity and history of a place has value that is not reducible to what can be taken from it. And learning to see this, learning to look at the world with eyes that register its intrinsic worth rather than its instrumental utility, is a kind of ethical practice, a way of being in the world that has to be cultivated. That requires overcoming a great deal of conditioning. And it begins, as most ethical practices begin, with attention. With simply noticing what is there before you decide what to do with it. Part 10. Music as Philosophy. Steven Universe is one of the most musically rich animated series ever made. This is not incidental. Rebecca Sugar is a songwriter, and the show treats music not as decoration but as argument, as a mode of philosophical expression that can say things about identity and love and grief and connection that prose, however precise, cannot fully capture. Stronger Than You is the first great example. It is the show's clearest statement about the nature of Garnet's fusion, about love as a form of strength rather than a form of weakness. The melody is joyful, almost taunting. Garnet is winning a fight and singing about it. The joy is the point. The joy is the argument. Being loved and loving, being a being who contains love as her fundamental nature, makes Garnet stronger, not in spite of the love, because of it. This is a direct response to the homeworld ideology, which views fusion as contamination. The song says, "Look at what this makes us. Look at how this power is generated. It comes from connection, from two beings choosing each other every day and making something together that neither of them could be alone." It's Over, Isn't It is the show's great song of grief, Pearl's song, the one she sings alone in a dark theater trying to process the fact that Rose has chosen Greg, is no longer the center around which Pearl's world orbits. The melody is heartbreaking in the specific way that musical beauty can hold sorrow without resolving it. Pearl sings about the future, about knowing that what she had with Rose is over, that there is no returning to it. This song does something very difficult to do in any form. It holds grief and acceptance simultaneously. Pearl is not pretending to be over it. She is also not refusing to move forward. She is in the difficult middle space, the space that does not have a simple name, the space where you know something is finished and you are still feeling all of it. Here Comes a Thought is one of the show's most direct philosophical statements and one of its most accessible. The thought arrives, the intrusive thought, the anxious thought, the thought that triggers shame or fear, and the practice the song describes is not to push it away or drown it out. The practice is to notice it, to let it exist, to hold it gently and say, "Here is a thought, and it is not me. It is something that is happening, and I can let it be there, and it will move through me if I let it." This is mindfulness practice rendered in song, and it works in ways that a description of mindfulness as a list of instructions never quite does. The music embodies the quality of attention it is describing. Listening to it is itself a practice of the gentle, non-reactive awareness the song is about. What's the use of feeling blue reveals something important about Yellow Diamond that the show would take much longer to say in dialogue. Yellow sings it to Blue Diamond in the zoo, trying to convince her to stop mourning Pink and return to the business of running an empire. But even as she tells Blue that feeling is useless, the song itself is full of feeling. Yellow is grieving Pink too. She is just expressing it by working harder, converting loss into motion so that she never has to stand still with it. The song shows us in 3 minutes that Yellow Diamond's seemingly cold exterior is a management strategy, not an absence of emotion. This is more efficient than any dialogue scene could be. Change Your Mind, the song that ends Season 5's main run, is both a direct address from Steven to White Diamond and a thesis statement for what the show believes. You do not have to be what they made you to be. You are allowed to be someone different. The song does not explain the cosmology of the diamonds, or answer where they came from. It just insists, gently and then with considerable force, that change is possible. That the past does not have to be the future. That whoever you were built to be, you can become someone else. Music in the show is used to mark the moments when normal narrative logic reaches its limits. The big emotional beats are given to music because song can hold the thing that is too large for language. The composers Avi and Surashu gave the show a musical identity that is quite distinct from anything else on children's television. Soft, slightly melancholy, occasionally startlingly beautiful. The kind of score that creates mood without announcing itself, that makes the world feel like the world feels at 2 in the morning when things are quiet and real. And Rebecca Sugar's songwriting gives every character a distinctive musical voice. Pearl's songs are melodically precise, emotionally restrained on the surface with something enormous, barely contained beneath. Amethyst's musical moments are rougher, freer, slightly chaotic. Garnet's are powerful and clean. Greg's are folk rock, human, rooted in a musical tradition that predates the gem world entirely. You can hear who they are in how they sing, in what intervals they choose, in how they hold a note or let it go. Part 11. Empathy as Force. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas spent much of his philosophical career thinking about the face, specifically the human face as a site of ethical encounter. He argued that when you truly look at another person's face, something happens that precedes any conceptual framing, any categorization, any decision about whether this person is friend or enemy, useful or threatening. Something in the face calls on you. It says, here is a person, here is a being who can suffer and die and hope and be afraid. And that call creates an obligation. Not a legal or social obligation, but a more fundamental one, prior to all law and convention. The obligation simply to recognize this person as real. This is the philosophical engine underneath Steven Universe's treatment of empathy. Steven's power is not that he has better arguments than the diamonds, or that he can defeat them militarily. His power is that he looks at their faces. He allows their reality to call on him. He does not protect himself from the encounter by keeping them safely in the category of villain or adversary. He lets them be real to him, and in letting them be real to him, he creates the conditions under which they can be real to themselves. The corrupted gems are a particularly important case for this. They have been so damaged by the diamond's attack that they no longer have coherent form, no longer have language, no longer have what we would recognize as consciousness. They are dangerous and in pain and have no means of communicating either the danger or the pain. Most people in the universe treat them as threats to be contained. The crystal gems initially treat them similarly as problems to be solved, hazards to be managed. Steven insists on a different framing. He asks, what do they want? He tries to determine what each corrupted gem is reaching for, what the distorted behavior is an expression of. He does not assume that the corruption has entirely replaced the person. He keeps looking for the person, and in several cases, the looking makes a difference. The act of being sought, of being treated as someone who might still be findable inside the damage, is itself a form of care. This is the show's most radical claim about empathy, that the act of seeking someone is itself healing, that to be searched for, to have someone refuse to accept your erasure as final, is to be given something essential, not fixed, not solved, but given the knowledge that you are real enough, important enough to be sought. In the therapeutic literature, there is a concept called attunement, the therapist's capacity to resonate with the client's internal state, to track it moment to moment, to communicate that resonance back to the client through small verbal and nonverbal signals. Attunement, research has shown, is not just a nice feature of good therapy, it is one of its primary healing mechanisms. To feel attuned to feel that another person is tracking your interior state with care and precision, is to have the experience of being real. And for people whose early experiences did not provide this, whose caregivers were not attuned to them, whose interiority was not consistently recognized, this experience can be genuinely reparative. Steven is, throughout the show, an extraordinarily attuned person. He tracks others' emotional states instinctively. He notices when people are not saying what they mean. He feels what is going on in a room even when no one is putting it into words. This is part of what makes him so effective as an emissary to the Diamonds. He can feel his way into their experience in a way that bypasses their defenses. He does not argue with White Diamond about whether her system is justified. He simply lets himself feel the loneliness and the fear underneath it, and in feeling it, makes it visible to her. But the show is also honest about the costs of this. In future, Steven's attunement, his hyper-awareness of others' states, his instinct to manage and smooth and absorb, is part of what breaks him. He has given so much empathy outward for so long that he has used it as a way of not having to attend to his own interior. The empathy has been, in part, a distraction. If I am always focused on what others are feeling, I never have to sit with what I am feeling. And when his capacity to do that breaks down, when the feelings become too large to keep routing outward, the whole system destabilizes. The therapist Dr. Maheswaran models for him what healthy empathy looks like from the inside. Attentive to others, yes, but not at the expense of self-knowledge. Genuinely caring, yes, but with the boundaries that make caring sustainable. Empathic, but also honest about her own internal state, willing to say what she is feeling rather than only asking about Stevens. This is the show's complete picture of empathy, a practice that requires self-knowledge as its foundation. You cannot truly attend to another person's interior if you have no developed relationship to your own. You cannot sustain genuine care over time without also caring for yourself. And you cannot be truly present to another person, truly meeting them in the I-thou sense, if you are so defended against your own experience that you are always slightly behind glass. To be fully seen and to fully see, this is what the show presents as the deepest form of connection available to beings who exist in relationship with each other. Not possession, not merger, not control. Just the willingness to be present, to look, to allow the face of the other to call on you, and to respond to that call without flinching. The climax of the show's main run, the episode Change Your Mind, is a philosophical statement in its purest form. Steven Universe has spent 5 seasons building toward this moment, and the moment is not a battle won by superior force. It is a moment of being truly seen. Steven, having confronted each diamond in turn, is restored to himself after White Diamond's attempt to divide him. And when White Diamond reaches out to control him the way she has controlled the others, she cannot. Because Steven is not a gem. He is something she has no category for. And her attempt to see through his eyes results instead in something she has never experienced. She sees herself through his eyes. She sees herself as he sees her, not as a god, not as perfection, but as a person who has caused enormous harm and who is afraid, at the deepest level, of being wrong. Her white glow cracks and underneath it there is color. She blushes pink, and for the first time in what may have been an unimaginable stretch of time, she is genuinely, visibly herself. Empathy in Steven Universe is not just a feeling of sympathy. It is the act of genuine seeing, of allowing another person's reality to fully enter you, of letting their experience be real to you rather than filtered through your own needs and categories and defenses. It is, in the show's terms, a kind of force, not because it defeats enemies in any conventional sense, but because it creates the conditions under which change becomes possible. Steven cannot force the diamonds to change. He cannot defeat them militarily or argue them into reform through pure logic. What he can do, what he does again and again with everyone he encounters, is see them. See the person behind the power. See the pain behind the projection. See the grief that has driven Yellow Diamond's efficiency, and the loss that has kept Blue Diamond frozen, and the terror that has made White Diamond choose perfection over connection. And the seeing creates an opening. Not always immediately, not always cleanly, but every person who is genuinely seen, who has the experience of being fully known without judgment, without the need to perform, is changed by that experience. The other place this is explored is in Steven's relationship to the corrupted gems. He does not fight them as monsters. He fights them when he must, to protect people. But when the immediate danger is contained, he approaches them with the question, "Who are you? What are you? What happened to you?" He does not accept their corrupted state as their nature. He keeps the question open. This is what it means to practice empathy as a discipline rather than as an emotion. The decision to approach another being, even a being that appears monstrous, even a being that is actively causing harm, with the question, who is this really? What are they carrying? What is the person inside the behavior? This does not mean accepting harm. Steven also maintains boundaries. He protects himself and others. But he does not close the door to the person on the other side of the behavior. He keeps it open. And the open door is what makes healing possible when healing eventually becomes available. The show also depicts empathy as a practice that requires care for the self. Steven's therapist creates space specifically for Steven's interior, for what he is feeling, not what he has done for others, not how others are doing, but what is actually happening inside him. The therapy scenes in Future are some of the most quietly radical moments in the show, because they insist the empathic person also has an interior that deserves attention. The person who cares for everyone else is also someone who deserves to be cared for. Empathy is not sustainable as a one-way channel. It requires reciprocity, or at minimum, an internal practice of self-compassion that keeps the channel from running dry. To see someone truly is to accept their autonomy. To accept that they are their own story, and you are a character in it, not the author. That is both the hardest and the most generous thing empathy can offer. Part 12. The Philosophy of Endings. In the very first episode of the show, Steven eats a magical ice cream sandwich called a cookie cat, and his gem glows for the first time and he sings a little jingle. A jingle that came from a toy commercial that has the refrain, "He left his family behind." The show plants its ending in its beginning. Steven will have to leave, not because he does not love his family, because he loves them, and himself, and the future that is not yet named, and because movement is what life requires. By the time Steven Universe Future arrives at its own ending, the parallels are explicit. Steven has saved the world. The crystal gems are healing. The diamonds are undergoing their slow renegotiation of everything they thought was true. Beach City is intact. His friends are there. His father is there. The gem on his stomach is stable, and Steven looks at all of it and knows that he needs to go, not because anything is wrong, because something is finished. Because this chapter, the chapter in which Beach City was the whole world, in which the crystal gems were his whole orbit, has reached its natural close, and the next chapter is somewhere else. The next chapter is the open road, a van like his father drove, a world he has not explored yet, becoming someone he has not been yet. The goodbye scene is the show at its most emotionally complete. It is long, and it is not afraid of the difficulty. Every goodbye is real. The crystal gems cry. Greg cries. Connie cries. Steven cries. They all know that what is ending is real. That the particular configuration of this life, these people, in this place, in this season of all their lives is ending. And they also know, without it needing to be stated, that endings are not losses. They are transformations. The love does not end when the configuration changes. The relationship does not stop existing when the people involved stop occupying the same space every day. What is real stays real. What was built between people persists, even across distance, even across change, even across all the ways that living continues to reshape everyone involved. This is the show's final philosophical statement. Change is not loss. Movement is not betrayal. Growth requires leaving some things behind. And leaving things behind is not the same as abandoning them. You can love a place and leave it. You can love people and move away from them. You can honor a chapter of your life by letting it be a chapter, complete, finished, not the whole story. The philosopher Heraclitus said that you cannot step in the same river twice. The water is different. You are different. The encounter is always new. Steven Universe has been making this argument since its first episode, that a person is not a fixed thing but a process, a river, always in motion. That identity is not a destination you arrive at, but a current you are always in the middle of. There is a recurring image in the show: the beach at night, the ocean, the particular quality of darkness over water when the stars are out. The ocean is the show's symbol of the infinite, of the vastness that exists beyond the small familiar life of Beach City, of the world that is larger than any one story. Steven runs along that beach in the title sequence. He stands on it in moments of crisis and uncertainty. He looks out at it when he does not know what comes next, and the ocean does not answer. The ocean is just there, enormous, patient, utterly indifferent to the smallness of any individual question, and utterly beautiful in its indifference. Philosophy, real philosophy, is not a set of answers. It is a practice of better questions, of clearer seeing, of the capacity to sit with uncertainty without closing it off prematurely. Steven Universe is a philosophical text in this sense, not because it resolves the questions of identity and love and grief and power, but because it holds them open, carefully, beautifully, for as long as the show runs, inviting its audience to hold them too. There is a moment in the show that gathers all of these threads together in a way that is almost impossibly quiet. It is in the third episode of Season 1, Lion 3, Straight to Video, when Steven discovers Rose's VHS tape and watches it for the first time at the Big Donut, on a borrowed player, with Lars and Sadie half paying attention and the afternoon light coming in through the window. The tape opens, with Rose trying to figure out how the camera works. She keeps talking to Pearl, who is presumably holding it. She says, "Is it on?" a few times. She sounds, in those first few seconds, entirely human, flustered, present, real. Not like a legend, not like a martyr. Like someone who has never done this before and is doing it anyway, because she has decided she needs to leave something behind and she does not know exactly what to say or how to say it, and she is going to try regardless. And then she figures it out, and she looks into the camera, and she tells Steven she is already a part of him. She tells him she loves him. She tells him she has given up being a person so that he can be his own person. And she tells him, though she could not possibly have known the specific shape of what this would mean, that she is sorry. She does not specify what she is sorry for. The apology is open, as so much of Rose is open, left deliberately or inadvertently without the specifics that might close it. She is sorry for the things she did. She is sorry for the things she left him to carry. She is sorry that she ran out of time. And what stays with me about that moment, what has stayed with so many viewers for so long, is not the apology or even the declaration of love. It is the "is it on?" It is the 2 seconds of someone trying to figure out the camera. It is the evidence that she did not know how to do this, that she was figuring it out as she went, that she was imperfect and trying and genuinely doing her best with the time she had, because that is the true subject of Steven Universe. Not the battles and the diamonds and the corrupted gems and the fate of the earth. All of that is the container. The true subject is this: people trying. People who are imperfect and shaped by things they did not choose and limited by blind spots they cannot fully see, and who are trying anyway. Who are getting on camera and saying, "Is it on?" and then taking a breath and attempting to say something real to someone they love, knowing they will not get it perfectly right, knowing the thing they are trying to say is too large for any words they have, and saying it anyway. That is the philosophy, not the answers, the trying, the showing up, the willingness to be imperfect in front of someone you love, because imperfect and present is better than perfect and absent. You are not what you were made to be. You are what you are becoming. Love is not a feeling. It is what you do. Grief does not end. It transforms. Connection is the only real power. The world you were born into is not the world that has to be. Every question you ask is a form of resistance against the systems that would prefer you not to ask. And endings are not losses. They are just the shape that life takes when it is honest about the fact that it is always moving forward. These are the things that a show about magical rock aliens taught, very carefully, to a generation of viewers who needed to hear them, who were lying in the dark, exactly as you are lying in the dark right now, listening to a voice in the quiet and feeling something shift, something quiet and real and yours. In the final scene of Steven Universe Future, Steven drives away from Beach City. The van moves along the coast road. In the back window, his friends and his father recede, their figures small against the enormous backdrop of the town they have all called home. And Steven does not stop. He drives into the future, towards something he has not seen yet, with his whole heart open. The ocean is still there, the stars are still out, and somewhere, a small boy is still running along a beach, waving at everyone he knows, in the gold light of a permanent afternoon. Rest now. Let the thoughts move through you like water. Let the ocean be as large as it needs to be. You are in the middle of your own becoming, and that is exactly where you should be. Good night. If this is the kind of thing that helps you rest, if these ideas found you at the right moment, in the right dark, please leave a like and subscribe. There is more of this coming. Long, slow dives into shows that deserved more time than the world gave them. The subscribe button is right there whenever you are ready. Good night. There is something worth sitting with, here at the end. The way the show handles time. Steven Universe exists in a world where some of its characters are thousands of years old. They have memories that predate human civilization. They have watched empires rise and fall. They have outlived everyone they knew in their earliest years, outlived entire generations of the humans they have come to love. And yet the show never lets this become a reason to dismiss the present. It never allows the antiquity of the gems to make the small things small. This is philosophically significant. The argument could easily be made, and sometimes is, in lesser fiction, that eternal beings cannot really care about mortal things, that the scale of their existence makes human concerns trivial. The show refuses this conclusion entirely. Garnet has been alive for thousands of years, and she cries at Ruby and Sapphire's wedding. Pearl has existed since before recorded human history, and she is moved, genuinely moved, by a piece of music, by a sunset, by Steven learning to ride a bike. Amethyst was born before any human now living, and she gets genuinely excited about a new flavor of ice cream. This is the show's insistence on the irreducible value of the present moment. It does not matter how long you have lived. This moment, this specific configuration of this specific afternoon, is still worth being in. The scale of time does not diminish the scale of presence. The fact that you will live to see many sunsets does not make this sunset less worth seeing. This is a philosophical position with roots in many traditions. The Stoics wrote about living in accordance with nature, about finding the complete good in the present moment rather than deferring it to some future state. The Buddhist tradition talks about impermanence not as a source of sadness but as a reason for full presence. If this moment is the only moment, then this moment deserves everything. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote about learning to love the questions themselves, to live them, rather than demanding answers that have not yet become available. Steven Universe teaches all of this without naming any of it. It teaches it by showing us characters who are present, who feel deeply, who take the small things seriously, who are moved. It teaches it by making the beach at sunset just as important as the cosmic conflict, by making the conversation with a friend just as real as the mission to save the world, by insisting in every episode that this, right here, is the stuff of life, that the meaning is not somewhere else, in some larger context, waiting to become visible when you have the full picture. The meaning is in this, in exactly what is happening, in the being here, now, fully, and then there is the question of forgiveness. Not as a theme the show announces, but as something that gradually emerges from the accumulation of its choices. Steven forgives. Not easily, not automatically, not without grappling with what he is being asked to forgive, but he moves in the direction of it. He keeps his heart open to people who have done real harm, who have hurt him and people he loves. He does this not because harm does not matter, but because he understands that unforgiveness is also a kind of prison, and he does not want to live in a prison. This is not the show telling us that forgiveness is easy. Pearl's storyline, Bismuth's storyline, the entire arc of the Diamonds, these make clear that forgiveness is the work of years, of decades, of lifetimes. You do not simply decide to forgive and have it be done. You decide to move toward forgiveness, to keep moving toward it even when it retreats, to treat it as a direction rather than a destination. And the show is equally clear that forgiveness does not require reconciliation. You can forgive someone and not continue the relationship. You can forgive someone and still maintain that what they did was wrong. You can forgive without pretending that nothing happened, without acting as though the harm was not harm. Forgiveness, in the show's understanding, is something you do for yourself. It is the decision to set down a weight that is hurting you to carry. It is not a gift to the person who harmed you. It is a gift to yourself. The last thing to say about the philosophy of Steven Universe is something about what it asks of its audience. Because it does ask something. It is not a passive viewing experience. It is a show that keeps posing questions in the space between the screen and the watcher, questions that do not resolve when the episode ends. It expects you to carry them, to let them do their work on you, to be changed by the act of paying attention. In the best stories, the story and the reader enter into a kind of fusion. The narrative is not something that happens to you from the outside. It becomes part of your interior life. You carry the characters with you. Their questions become your questions. Their small victories feel like something you participated in. Their grief touches something in your own. Steven Universe, for many people, became exactly this kind of story. The characters became interior presences. The questions they wrestled with became questions worth wrestling with. The idea that you are not what you were made to be, that love is a practice, that grief does not end but transforms, that power without accountability damages everyone, that empathy is a force. These ideas did not stay in the show. They traveled. They settled into the lives of the people who watched. This is what art does when it is working. It extends the range of what you can feel and think and imagine. It makes available to you an interiority that was previously inaccessible. It gives you not answers, but company. The company of characters who are wrestling with the same things you are wrestling with, who are figuring it out imperfectly, who are trying. You are still trying. That is the whole of what anyone is doing. And somewhere, in a permanent animated afternoon, a small boy is still running toward his future, waving at everyone he loves, full of something that has no better name than hope. Rest well. What makes Steven Universe endure, even now, even after the animation has ended and the credits have rolled for the final time, is something that is difficult to name without sounding grandiose. But here it is. The show loved its characters, not in the way that commercial storytelling loves characters, which is to say instrumentally, as delivery mechanisms for plot. It loved them the way you love people you know. It knew them. It knew their patterns of deflection and their moments of genuine presence, and the specific ways each of them was both damaged and beautiful. And it showed them to us with that knowledge, with that full attention, with that refusal to reduce any of them to less than what they actually were. This is rare, and the rarity of it is felt. When we encounter a piece of art that genuinely knows its characters, that holds them with real care, we feel it in the body. We feel something release that we did not know we were holding. Some longing for recognition, some need to see the full picture of a complicated person held without judgment, some hunger for the experience of being seen completely. We feel all of that, briefly, by proxy, in the experience of watching characters be truly known. Steven Universe gives us that again and again, across hundreds of episodes and years of story. It gives it to Steven, who is seen by his father and his friends and eventually by the diamonds themselves. It gives it to Pearl, whose grief is enormous and real and never waved away. It gives it to Amethyst, whose defense mechanisms are seen through with gentle insistence. It gives it to Peridot, who is discovered to be more than her function. It gives it to Garnet, who is allowed to be both the strong, certain leader, and the ruby and the sapphire, who sometimes disagree and sometimes hurt and always return. And in giving it to them, it gives something to us. It reminds us that this kind of attention, this refusal to reduce a person to less than they are, is possible. That it is something art can do, and something people can do, and something worth practicing in the ordinary interactions of an ordinary life. Good night. Rest. You are known. You are here. And that is enough.